when you think about literally all of our 30 plus trillion cells in the body need these polysaccharides to function properly. That's the reason why these polysaccharides work so well, is because it's kind of like giving, if your car has water in the gas tank and you're always giving it low test grade fuel, and then you get that water cleaned out and you start putting in high test fuel, suddenly your engine starts working again like it's new. Same thing with our cells. If we increase the nutrient capacity and density of what we're feeding them, then they start working much better.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friend, welcome back to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm Jenn Trepic, your host and health coach, here with you every week for wellness without the weirdness. Now, we often talk about the importance of gut health, and we've had quite a few episodes. We are coming up with quite a few episodes that are all about the connection between the gut and our overall health, and even the gut and our immune health. Today, we're going to talk about a powerful tool as it relates to chronic disease. And I think for a lot of people, this is going to be pretty eye-opening. So let me introduce you to our featured guest. He's the founder and president of Dr. Lewis Nutrition and past full-time associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. He's also a diplomat, faculty member, and advisor of the Medical Wellness Association and a lecturer for the Institute for Brain Potential. He's been the principal investigator of over 30 different studies in his research career. Much of his research has focused on evaluating the effects of nutrition, dietary supplementation, and exercise on various aspects of human health and disease. In addition to his research, he's an international lecturer at conferences and workshops, and as a guest on television shows with over 180 peer-reviewed publications in scientific journals, such as AIDS and Behavior, American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, American Journal of Public Health, Nutrition, and Cancer, an international journal, the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, and more. He embodies the model of health and wellness by eating a whole food, plant-based diet for over 27 years, taking certain key dietary supplements, and through a rigorous daily exercise training regimen. He has a passion for educating others about the value of nutrition, exercise, and health, which brings him here to Salad with a Side of Fries. You see why we're a vibe. Without further ado, I give you Dr. John Lewis.
Thank you, Jenn, for having me here. It's my pleasure. It's a great introduction.
Absolutely. Good. I'm thrilled to have you. I know our last conversation feels like it was ages ago, and I'm so excited for this. I want to start with your story and how you came to studying aloe and polysaccharides. But first, we have to tell our members what they're getting. So members, your recipe this week is for cauliflower salad with dates and pistachios. It is the perfect balance of sweet and savory. At this time of year, you can serve it warm or cold, pair it with your favorite protein, or add your protein right into it, and you have a great meal or a snack. And then fitting for today's episode, I'm giving you 10% off my favorite aloe. So this one will make more sense in a few minutes as we get into today's episode. So if you want this recipe or the discount, be sure you're a member. Go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For $10 a month, you get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It's a total deal, really a steal when you take advantage of the full offerings, because you're going to save far more than that $10 cost. It's seriously a no-brainer way to show yourself that your health is a priority. Plus, your membership supports this podcast and this community, so we can continue to bring you new episodes every week. So remember, all you have to do is go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or even easier is just click the link in the episode notes, because then you don't have to remember a whole long URL. Once you're there, you're going to click support now, enter your email and payment info, click subscribe, and you're done. You'll get this week's recipe for the cauliflower salad with dates and pistachios and 10% off my favorite aloe. Okay, Dr. John, you were a drug-free bodybuilder. How did you come to studying aloe?
Great question. I realized it early in my bodybuilding career, I was not going to make any money at it. I was certainly not going to make a living doing that. And it was just sort of, one of those moments in your life where you say, what am I doing here? And I didn't really think that, trying to, again, do all of this very narcissistic work was really ultimately at the end of the day, very beneficial to anyone, even myself. I mean, let's face it, trying to get yourself down to 3 or 4% body fat is not exactly, it's healthy. I mean, I still admire people that do it. And I still have this appreciation for the aesthetics that go into it, along with all of the hard work. But I just decided that it was much more important to me. And it didn't lead to that particular moment, like going from, well, I'm not going to compete in bodybuilding anymore, to finding out about these polysaccharides. There was a lot of time in between the two. But nonetheless, part of the answer to your question is that I shifted from more of a sports performance focus in my life to a health perspective or focus in my life. And then getting into research eventually, it was obviously much more important. I mean, think of how much research you read that's specifically related to sports performance compared to everything else out there. I mean, again, sports performance is like that much, and everything else is, a huge amount of information. And I say that with all due respect to anyone who's competing in an activity or a sport. I mean, certainly I have nothing against that. It's just that I think there's a lot bigger world out there of people who need help with their health, as opposed to figuring out how they can run the 100 meters faster, or, jump higher, or lift more weights, or whatever. So I eventually, as I started my research career, and of course, as you alluded to in my introduction, I've done a lot of work just in general in nutrition and dietary supplementation and exercise. But about 20 years ago, I met a couple of people who really turned me on to the idea of how these polysaccharides from aloe vera and rice bran could be so beneficial to people. And I don't know about you, but my experience with polysaccharides or saccharides in general in school was, I don't know, maybe one biochemistry lesson or lecture.
If that, for most of us, right?
Exactly. I mean, it wasn't even that much information that I learned as a student. So I had no appreciation for saccharides beyond being a source of energy for mitochondria. I mean, that was basically it. I had no clue about the benefits of these polysaccharides, and particularly from aloe vera and rice bran that my colleagues and I have worked on. So I'm very indebted to Dr. Reg McDaniel, a pathologist by training in the Dallas area, who I met through a mutual acquaintance on the Aloe side, and then a patient we had here at the University of Miami Medical Center. She was a cancer patient who introduced me to the rice bran side. And it just not only completely changed my career, it completely changed my life, in the sense that it just took me to a different level of having an appreciation and a perspective on what Mother Nature provides to us, and then being able to utilize those particular nutrients or phytonutrients for health. And it just, again, it took me down a path of all this research that hopefully we'll get into, but it was really about me being, let's just say, open-minded to any possibility. My personality is the type that if you come to me with an idea or something that you're working on and you say, hey, John, look at this, or, see how this may work, I'm always willing to at least consider those things. Whether or not I end up doing something is, a different conversation, but at least being open-minded to say, hey, that sounds interesting. Let me learn more. And then again, just many steps happened, and it just completely changed my life and my career.
Yeah, I so appreciate the inquisitive nature of what you just shared, because I feel, akin to that, right? I'm just a constant learner in everything. Let's take a step back for a second. You started to mention, what polysaccharides are and what we knew them. So for the layperson, what are polysaccharides? Why are they important? And where do they typically come from?
Great question. So psychologists refer to something called the teachable moment. And one of the things that gives me a lot of, I guess, pleasure, if you will, about being involved in this work for so many years now is that when you do say the word polysaccharide, 95% of the people in the world really, they don't know what you're talking about. And so again, it's that teachable moment where you can take a word and then turn it into an opportunity to help people understand. So if we had said sugar or complex sugar, what happens to the average person? He or she immediately links sugar to bad, right? Oh, that's bad. Any kind of a sugar is immediately, automatically deemed bad for you. But that is a very misleading and, in fact, ignorant thought, or just ignorant way of looking at, again, what Mother Nature provides to us in the world. And so sugars are really defined, at least primarily, by two major characteristics. One is their biochemical structure, and two is their source. So the biochemical structure of monosaccharides, disaccharides, and poly or oligosaccharides are very different. And so a monosaccharide like fructose, high fructose corn syrup, we all are aware of that, or I think most people are. You make sure you read your labels. If anything has high fructose corn syrup in it, by all means, try to at least reduce it, if not completely eliminate it. And I'll be the first to, go along with the crowd about that's not exactly the type of sugar you want to eat. But then step up one more notch, you have disaccharides, which like sucrose are, somewhere in between in terms of how they affect your glycemic response, whether it's through glucose or insulin production. And then finally, you have the most complex saccharides or carbohydrates. And those are just literally all these different glucose units bonded together. They have very unique properties in terms of their molecular structures and their glycosidic links. And these things that come from, again, aloe vera and rice bran that I've focused so much of my work on are just so dynamic and so beneficial to health. Now, they're not the only two foods that have these polysaccharides. I mean, there are lots of things like, of course, so many different mushrooms we know are very potent in their polysaccharide content. Things like seaweed, different types of seaweeds from the ocean, they have very high polysaccharide content. I mean, we could look at even things like, potatoes, right? I mean, potatoes, depending on the potato, has lots of different polysaccharides in them. But again, there is just something very special and dynamic. And it's not just from our lab. I mean, the work that we've done now for the last 20 years, and by the way, we're still publishing, even though I'm not in academics full time anymore. But these polysaccharides they just have very special qualities that impact so many different metabolic pathways in our cellular structure. And I mean, hopefully we'll talk a little bit about some of this published research. But again, I would tell you that it doesn't matter if you're vegan or carnivore or paleo or keto. I don't care what your dietary philosophy is. It's very difficult to get these polysaccharides from food. And this is where dietary supplements can come in and make a big addition to your daily routine. But it's just, again, Jen, I've had just an incredible run of this for the last almost 20 years, and I'm continuing to publish. And I've got some friends are currently raising money to do more research. I mean, that's been one of the biggest challenges, of course, is having enough money to do research in nutrition and dietary supplements. It's not like big pharma where, these companies like Pfizer and J&J,
Exactly.
those are the big ones, Eli Whitney, they can just throw billions of dollars in testing a chemical. It's far, far different in the so-called natural world.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you is because you already have tons of research published. And when you were at University of Miami, you were able to do a lot of research. And it's so hard to have funding for research on nutrients or even specific foods. How did even all of that come to be? And then I want to, get into all of those findings and things.
Sure. So on the aloe side, my colleague, Dr. McDaniel, he was actually giving a lecture that he was presenting to a group of people about some of the work that he had been doing anecdotally. This was not like clinical trial data, but just, individual people that had Alzheimer's or another form of dementia and Parkinson's. So he was sharing this really impressive information, and a lady in the audience heard his lecture, came up to him afterward. She and her husband started a conversation and a relationship with Dr. McDaniel, and they had 4 family members die of Alzheimer's. I'm sure if you've had anybody in your family or anyone that you know close by that's had this terrible, tragic disease, how devastating it is. And from a conventional medical perspective, there really is not much to offer these folks. And so they said, wow, we've got some money. We'd love to donate it to research. Just our only requirement is that you do a study in Alzheimer's. And so, Jen, it was only through the generosity of this one family that we were able to run this clinical trial. Dr. McDaniel he was not affiliated with any university at that time. He was just kind of running his own little mom and pop business like I am now. But he called me up and he said, John, I've got an opportunity for us to do some research on the allopolysaccharides, but we have to do it in Alzheimer's. And I hadn't had any family. I mean, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, my father, they all died of various things, but nothing in the dementia or Alzheimer's world. And so I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to at least have some money in some area. And as I began writing the protocol and educating myself more about this disease, it dawned on me how really significant this work would be. At that point, I knew nothing about the expectation of what we would show. And it turned out to be actually even better than what we expected. But that was, again, to your point about how difficult it is to try to do research either on a nutrient or a food or even a dietary pattern. I mean, man, it's just like, it's pulling teeth to try to find those funds somewhere. And it's a shame we have, so many wealthy people all around the world and they want to donate to these causes that what I feel like are, maybe okay, but compared to what we could do with nutrition, it doesn't even compare. And so I mean, this isn't really a call to action to any of your listeners.
Well, I was going to say, I'm like, shameless plug or, request for anybody out there looking to donate, right? Like, this is an area of the world where we could use, funding.
That's right. If you have some philanthropists in your audience, by all means, please either contact you or send me an email or call me and say, hey, I've got money that I set aside for research, for donation. I mean, absolutely. I didn't necessarily plan that call to action, but
yeah, let's talk about so that study was looking at Alzheimer's. So tell us what you guys found and sort of what is this mechanism or connection between the polysaccharides and Alzheimer's?
Well, we were able to take some of that funding just sort of in a piggybacking sense. We worked with a clinic in Alabama that focuses specifically on multiple sclerosis. So we're actually able to piggyback on top of our Alzheimer's study with another clinical trial in people with multiple sclerosis. So it's interesting because, and this isn't through my lab's work. I mean, this is through other people around the world going all the way back to at least the 80s. I mean, the study of these different polysaccharides has been going on a lot longer than I had even realized or recognized when, again, we first got into this. But every cell, as you know, every cell utilizes multiple different things. And so what the study of glycobiology or glycomics has shown so far is that there are particular polysaccharides that the cells utilize within the organelles, of course, within the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi primarily, where they take those molecules of these different polysaccharides and they link them together, and then it helps to create other glycoconjugates. So whether it's a glycoprotein, a glycolipid, and then, of course, those are the stage before they then create something like a cytokine or a growth factor, or where a cell replicates itself, or where a cell talks to another cell. So these are as fundamental as it gets. I mean, of course, oxygen's our first nutrient, right? And then we need vitamins and minerals and other elements. But when you think of the macronutrients, whether you're talking about, fats, proteins, or carbohydrates, these polysaccharides are so dynamic in the way they function. And the body is intelligent enough to take like a bunch of fructose or a bunch of glucose, mash all of those things together into polysaccharides. But our theory is that obviously is not the way or what our cells prefer. Otherwise, we wouldn't be ravaged with all these different chronic diseases today. And so as the diet has shifted from the early 20th century, where most people were still involved in agriculture and growing their own food to some extent, to where it is today, really starting in the 60s with the Green Revolution. And then, of course, fast food taking over and all this other stuff, genetic modification, all the herbicides, pesticides, et cetera. All of that has really weakened the common foods nutrient amount, right? I mean, all these nutrients are now like a tomato, for example. I read a study 100 years ago, a tomato had so much more nutrition than the typical tomato does today. So unfortunately, one of the major insults to our foods has been that all these polysaccharides that used to be a lot more common in food have now been reduced to very minimal amounts. So again, this is where a formula like ours can really come in to benefit you. But again, when you think about literally all of our 30 plus trillion cells in the body need these polysaccharides to function properly, that's the reason why these polysaccharides work so well, is because it's kind of like if your car has water in the gas tank and you're always giving it low test grade fuel, and then you get that water cleaned out and you start putting in high test fuel, suddenly your engine starts working again like it's new. Same thing with our cells. If we increase the nutrient capacity and density of what we're feeding them, then they start working much better. And of course, in light of being exposed to all these chemicals and radiation and all this other stuff going on in the environment, pollution that we can't really control, it's so much more important to feed our cells properly with these particular polysaccharides. But what we've published so far, and again, as I mentioned, I'm still publishing. I just had a fourth paper published from our Alzheimer's study just a couple of months ago. We've got a third paper from the MS study currently under review. So even though academic publishing is probably not my top 10 list of priorities for, running a business, it's still very important in running a science-based business as a key component of the foundation. But really what we've looked at in most of our work to date is focused on the immune system. And so I think a lot of people through the COVID experience learned that the immune system is not just our first line of defense against infection. It's actually much more important than that. It's really like the sort of the conductor of the symphony orchestra. It talks with all the other major organ systems. It helps to keep everything in balance. So what we've showed in our research, just very broadly speaking, is improved immune function according to the CD4 to CD8 ratio, which is important for all of us, not just for people with Alzheimer's or any other form of neurodegeneration. It's very important for all of us to keep that ratio pretty high. We've showed reductions in inflammation according to TNF alpha and VEGF, which are very commonly looked at cytokines that are mostly been shown to be very important to things like cardiovascular disease and cancer. But our paper was probably one of the first ones showing that change in people with Alzheimer's. We showed an improvement in adult stem cell production, which, oh, by the way, the people in our Alzheimer's study were on average 79.9 years of age. So these were very old people. They had moderate to severe severity of disease. So these were very sick people. They didn't just have Alzheimer's. They had diabetes, depression, hypertension. They had lots of other comorbid stuff going on as well. So very old, very sick people. And we were able to turn on their adult stem cell production process by just under 300% over that 12-month period. So just a huge change there. And as you know, one of the keys to living every day and just continuing to be here is that our cells are constantly replacing themselves throughout our entire body, throughout every organ. And that stem cell production is one of the hallmarks of aging, because unfortunately, as we age, we lose that capacity. So to be able to turn that back on again the way we did was just really astounding. And then we rebalanced several of the components. The Th1 to Th2 ratio is something that's very important. It's like this broad relationship between pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory markers. We were able to rebalance that. And all of that was also related to improved cognitive function, which we showed a clinically and statistically significant increase or improvement in cognitive function, again, in people with moderate to severe Alzheimer's. Jenn, that's unheard of. I mean, I don't care if you want to talk about the 5 FDA-approved drugs for dementia, some type of diet, other dietary supplements, hyperbaric oxygen, music therapy, sound therapy, acupuncture, you name it. I mean, somebody out there, please tell me a better result in their treatment or intervention than what we've showed in ours. And I don't mean to sound like an arrogant jerk when I say that, but I just know that I know this literature very well, and I haven't seen anything else to be able to do that. In the people with MS, we showed a very statistically significant reduction in infections, which for people with MS that's actually the leading cause of their death. It's not from the neurodegeneration, but they get some form of lung infection, UTI, or something else going on, and then they end up dying from sepsis from that infection. So we were able to lower infections in those folks. We showed just incredibly dramatic improvement in overall physical functioning, which obviously is much more affected in people with MS compared to people with Alzheimer's, where obviously it's more of the cognitive memory components. For people with MS, it's much more of the physical side. But across the board, we showed all kinds of changes in physical capacity, quality of life, mood, you name it. All these different symptoms dramatically improved for those folks as well. So very broadly speaking, we're talking about the ability for these polysaccharides to improve immune function, lower inflammation, improve adult stem cell production process, and then just generally improve overall quality of life. So just incredibly significant findings.
Yeah, it's absolutely tremendous. And I want to ask you more about, understanding chronic disease and understanding like polysaccharides and aloe versus other kinds of polysaccharides. But super quick, we have to take a break for our partner for this episode. Big thanks to DNA Miracles for supporting Salad with a Side of Fries. Because every child is a miracle, DNA Miracles provides the highest quality body and wellness products designed for babies, children, and expectant mothers. All products are gentle, easy to use, and 100% effective when used as directed. DNA Miracles partner with leading health professionals and scientists who follow the highest standards in ingredient selection to create the most effective skin, hair, and health solutions. As natural as possible, DNA Miracles is the best and safest option on the market for you and your little miracle. From expert pediatricians to real family testimonials, everyone has fallen in love with DNA Miracles. So today we're talking about the importance of particular nutrients, and we know our littles can often be particular about the foods that they eat, getting less variety than we know would truly serve their health. So it's fitting that we have DNA Miracles supporting this episode. So they actually created 3 different multivitamins to help you. One's a chewable, 2 are isotonic capable, which means improved bioavailability. And the DNA Miracles Isotonics Multivitamin Plus was formulated to support the needs of children who need particular nutritional support in the area of digestive, neurological, and metabolic health. Very fitting for our conversation today. So truly a phenomenal formula to set up your kids for success each day. I know you'll agree that your little's health is certainly worth a couple dollars a day. And that's before your discount for being a Salad with a Side of Fries listener. So to get 10% off and free shipping, text the word miracles, 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 plural, with an S, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word miracles, MIRACLES, to 844-947-4846. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. So, okay, we're talking about, neurodegenerative diseases and chronic disease. And we often connect all of this to the immune system, and you're connecting it to polysaccharides. Is it simply just providing missing nutrients that allows the body to function properly? Or what's that connection?
That's a great question. I do think it's the former. It's providing, again, the body can take sucrose, fructose, glucose, more of these common sugars, and reconstruct them into these different polysaccharides, but it's just not the same. It's completely based on the source, the original source. I just think, I don't know, I can't prove this yet, but I hope to, at some point in our line of research, look more actually beyond biochemistry. I think it's something on the physics level that's going on with these polysaccharides from aloe vera and rice bran, because they are just so dynamic. And I didn't even talk about the rice bran research yet, but their ability to create this more healthy state or healthier state is, I would put them up against anything else I've seen, whether it's curcumin or, some other phytonutrient or, vitamin D. There's been a lot of research, and C, lots of research done on the vitamins and minerals. But in terms of just the ability to impact our cells in a way that ultimately lead to such drastic improvements in health outcomes, it's incredible. I haven't seen anything else really like it.
Yeah. And then when last we spoke, some of the brain health stuff was even going beyond neurodegenerative, right? Like there was something connected to like TBI and,
right,
concussion syndrome. What's happening in that realm of the research?
So unfortunately, as we know, research for actual clinical trials is very limited, but I can tell you that within people that I've worked with individually, kind of much like going back to Dr. Reg 20 years ago when he was working with people individually with, these forms of neurodegeneration. I've had clients that I've worked with that have different forms of TBI and PTSD, concussion syndrome, all these things that are kind of lumped together. And in fact, I am working with a gentleman from New York who we may end up running a clinical trial on his concussion syndrome patients. He deals with a lot of people. Actually, they're not veterans or athletes. They're actually people involved in auto accidents. He says,
oh, wow.
Yeah, the people in auto accidents are the biggest number or the percentage of patients that he deals with the most. It's not, military coming back from combat or people playing sports and getting hit in the head or things like that. So we might actually end up running a clinical trial in concussion syndrome. But anecdotally speaking, I can tell you that it's working. And so even though neurodegeneration obviously takes a long time in most cases to appear, whereas, you fall and hit your head or you get hit with an object or something and you have that immediate trauma, the inflammation is still very similar. It still looks very similar. It's just that with the neurodegeneration, it's been going for many years, in some cases even decades. But with the acute trauma, then you still have that inflammation. But what seems to be happening with the folks struggling to recover from these concussion syndromes or TBI is that the inflammation doesn't shut off. Like the tissue gets healed, but then the inflammation keeps going. So that's obviously dysregulated immune function, which leads me to think that it's something else going on besides just the trauma. Like these people are probably not for example, in your world, they're not eating well, right? I mean, they probably have a poor diet that set them up for dysregulated immune function in the event of having an acute trauma. And now the body's ability to know when to shut off those cytokines and growth factors has been inhibited because they've probably been going through chronic stress like most people do anyway. I mean, we tend to be like the most stressed out group of people. I say we as Americans, we're, right there at the top of the list of any other country. And so we deal with all this chronic stress and then we get hit. And so our immune system responds to that trauma to try to heal it, but then it doesn't know how to shut off. And so that's where the acute trauma ends up turning into something that very pathologically speaking looks exactly like neurodegeneration. And so that's why our formula can still help these people really well, because the polysaccharides help to calm down that inflammation and modulate or enhance immune function.
Yeah. And so I guess that brings me to my next question, which is, polysaccharides are like a type of nutrient, right? And most people do get some polysaccharides, but more from like grains and starches compared to aloe and the rice bran, right? So what is the difference between the polysaccharides that somebody's getting from potatoes, for example? Lord knows I love potatoes, right?
Yep,
so,
me too.
Right? So what's the difference between those polysaccharides and why aloe and rice bran? Like, is there a difference in it? Is it just the concentration?
So I think the main difference is that the polysaccharides that we know of so far from aloe vera and rice bran are not considered like the same digestible starch polysaccharides that you get from potatoes or wheat or, other types of grains or vegetables. So it's just the fact that these polysaccharides are kind of like, I think, nutritionally or biochemically speaking, we almost need a new class, if you will, of being able to divine these sort of non-digestible polysaccharides that have such incredible immunomodulatory, antioxidative, anti-proliferative activity. And so it really kind of goes all the way back to one of my first comments in our interview, in our conversation, is that these polysaccharides' potential really truly do depend on the source. And I haven't seen anything else, again, whether it's potatoes or wheat or some other vegetable, that has these types of polysaccharides that have these very specific health promoting benefits. I mean, we know we all need the fiber benefit as well, right? That you can get from all sorts of different grains and legumes and vegetables. But that fiber is just one thing to, help flow waste out of our system and just keeping us, I guess, at a low toxification level. But again, these polysaccharides are like another class of nutrient that I think at some point, maybe, I don't know what kind of a consensus it would take to get a lot of people to really recognize this, but they truly are in a class of their own in terms of nutritional benefit and health promoting capacity.
Amazing. And so let's talk about it, because I have an aloe that I drink that's a high quality aloe, but I also know that in the world of our, modern life and food companies, that they can sell you a bottle of water with 1 drop of 100% aloe juice and call it 100% aloe juice, right? So how can we help people? What is the therapeutic dose that we're looking for? How can we help people choose a quality product, on their own? Yes, of course, they can come to us, but, what are they looking for to find something?
Well, forgive me for being a little bit of a contrarian on the juice side of aloe. I mean, it's a fine thing to do. I don't have anything against it, but it's going to have very little polysaccharide content to get like a therapeutic benefit. You'll still get the other benefits of, maybe having a better bowel movement or, just feeling like your gut's functioning better. But that's a totally different mechanism of action. It's not really on the same level in terms of if you're looking for something to help you. And again, maybe this is also a good point to say that I don't want any of your listeners to say, well, Lewis was talking about using nutrition to treat disease. That's not what I'm saying at all here. And we know that, FTC and FDA are very, they will pound you, they will hammer you if you're making disease claims about nutrition. So I'm not saying that at all. And let me clarify that. So with nutrition, as you know, we're providing the cells, the raw materials that they need to function properly as they are guided by the genes when the genes recognize that information and then tell the cells what to do. That's nutrition, and that enables our physiology. Whereas medicine, pharmacology, that's taking a chemical, not something from nature, but that's taking something that probably came from nature, but then modified into a chemical, and then looking at how we can alter a metabolic pathway to deal with a symptom of a disease for a disease, which then causes side effects because of the alteration of that metabolic pathway. So these are very, very different things here. And so I don't want anybody
Absolutely
to confuse me by saying that I'm using nutrition to treat disease. That's absolutely not what we're doing. This is, in my opinion, a way more powerful paradigm. But to answer your question, I mean, unless you want to go a little bit commercial here, I can keep it completely educational. I don't really, it'd be difficult for me to like tell your listeners what to look for outside of what I'm doing with my own stuff. Just because, I can't really verify the veracity of another company's quality of their products. I mean, I have a very good reason for using the aloe polysaccharides that I use in my products because I trust the owner of the company. This man is a PhD in biochemistry who has spent his entire career in aloe vera. And this man knows Dr. Santiago Rodriguez. I would put his knowledge on aloe vera up against literally any other person on the planet because that's all this man has studied in his whole life. And so to answer your question, I mean, if somebody's, if you want to keep it purely educational, this conversation, anybody listens is more than welcome to contact me about this. But the aloe polysaccharides, first of all, there are not a lot of companies that do this on the planet. I mean, it's a very limited number of people. It's not like all the manufacturers making vitamin C or calcium or magnesium.
Yes.
There are a lot of those that are doing that. But for the aloe polysaccharides, you really have to have a specialist like Dr. Rodriguez who knows how to take the plant, how to grow it in the right conditions, how to extract the polysaccharides out of all that gel. I mean, I have aloe vera. I live in Miami. We have aloe vera growing in our backyard, but I'm not out there cutting a leaf every day and sucking down the gel because that's not, again, much like a juice drink, that's not going to give me enough polysaccharide content to really have any therapeutic benefit. So again, without going too commercial here, what I would say is your listeners need to look for a product that has aloe polysaccharide in it. And it's got enough of a concentrated dose, like say, at least a couple of 100 milligrams per serving, which, it really is not a lot. But you need that amount of content to be able to have a therapeutic benefit.
Yeah. And I don't know how familiar you are, the International Aloe Science Council. And so how much, if a product is stamped by, the International Aloe Science Council, does that speak to purity, potency, and the kinds of things we'd be looking for?
Possibly. Again, the only caveat to that is the product, does it contain enough of the polysaccharide? Because as you know, aloe vera is not just polysaccharide. I mean, it's got everything in it. It's got protein, fats, carbohydrates, minerals, vitamins, elements, cofactors. I mean, it's loaded with tons of things in it. But you could just take that gel and, depending on how you manufacture it and whether or not you want to try to create like a more specific extraction process just to get one class of nutrients out of it or not. If it's just everything in there, then again, I would argue that it could be a pure product. It could be exactly what the product is in terms of the label. And we know that labeling in the dietary supplement world can sometimes be, unfortunately, very erroneous. I don't understand the people without any scruples out there doing that kind of business, but they'll eventually get caught, hopefully. But so with all due respect to the purity aspect of it, it still comes down to what is the extraction? Like, is it just broad spectrum everything, which again is fine? Or is it something like my products, which are focused on a much more concentrated amount of just these particular polysaccharides? Because I can get vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, amino acids from lots of other things. I don't need aloe vera to give me that. Or those.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll put links to all of your stuff in the episode notes for everybody. So, everybody can click over there and explore more. Anything we missed or a final thought before we do our rapid fire off topic questions?
Well, I like to go back to my original point of, considering polysaccharides as something very important that, again, regardless of your dietary style or preference, you're not getting these things from food. So I used to not actually, I've done quite a bit of a 180 on this. I used to think that you could get everything that you need from food. And then my goodness, as we were publishing all of the results from these studies, I'm like, wow, you cannot. Like there are certain things that you really need to supplement with because I don't know anybody who eats aloe vera. Again, I could go out in my yard every day and, cut leaves off the plant and suck that stuff down. But And I don't know anybody who eats aloe vera. So
right. Well, and that also could create some other side effects and other things.
Right. That's right. You're getting that latex material if you're not careful. So I would just encourage all of your listeners to really, be open-minded to say, wow, this guy's talking about something maybe I've never heard of before. He's got a lot of published science behind it, and not just from my lab, but people around the world that have been looking at this amazing plant and really how you can incorporate in that information into your daily routine and really take advantage of that. I mean, I don't know how many people go out to Starbucks every day and spend $8 or $10 on this big giant cup of whatever that mess is, but we're only talking like $1 or $2 of, very, very health promoting beneficial information for your cells that you can spend on to really just have incredible benefits from that compared to, again, I'm sorry to knock Starbucks, but all these other things out there that people blow their money on. So I mean, I wouldn't even hesitate. And I guess the last point, I'm sorry if I'm being a little long-winded.
No, you're good.
Is that our daughter just turned 4 this past week, and I started her on this formula when she was 6 months old, when we started introducing solid foods into her diet. My mom, I won't tell you her age, but she's up there. She's very sensitive about her age. She's been on this for a very long time. And then my wife was on it when she was pregnant. So I say all that to say that a lot of times people will say, oh, well, is it safe for this or that or whatever stage of life? For me, this is cradle to grave and all of us in between. There's no limitation on these polysaccharides in terms of how you need to be, what your current health state is, if you have an existing health challenge or whatever. There's no limitation on that. There's been no documented problems with interacting with medications. In fact, they actually will help when you improve your nutritional status. They help your health status to be able to, utilize things that you're maybe being treated for with disease. So there's really no downside to taking this. There's none.
Amazing. Absolutely. And I think, as you said, right, like increasing our health status, giving our body the nutrients that it's missing creates the environment for health versus an environment for disease.
That's right. Exactly.
Excellent. All right. So, ready for our rapid fire off-topic questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. What's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health this week?
I'm such a creature of habit. Nothing really changes. I mean, I just work out every day. I eat the same basic diet every day. I have been on a big run of cauliflower lately. So maybe adding cauliflower a bit more frequently to my regular routine has been maybe the best thing. The worst thing, some days I just don't sleep well. And that's not necessarily anything that I can control. I've tried melatonin in the past. It didn't do anything for me. I think I fall into that 5% of people where you can take 20 grams of it and you wouldn't even have an effect. So, but I think that's just part of the perils of running your own business and trying to deal with so many things. And I did stay up a little bit too late a couple of nights this past week. So that's the worst thing I've done. I kind of got a little bit out of my regular circadian rhythm.
Yeah, same. I like to think it happens to the best of us.
Exactly.
All right. If you weren't a researcher, educator, and the founder of Dr. Lewis Nutrition, what would you do?
Wow, that's a great question. I love doing what I do so much. I can't really think of anything else. I will say that as a kid, I had 2 really main interests. One was being an astronaut, and the other one was being a zookeeper. So I guess if I wasn't in the nutrition world, I might be doing something with animals or maybe figuring out how to get to somewhere in outer space.
Love it. And taking animals with you, right?
Yes, exactly. Having like an elephant go with me or something.
Perfect. Your favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise or a fiction book?
Wow. You know what? This is a terrible thing to say too. I'm reading journal articles so much.
I don't blame you. I get that.
that I actually don't like reading books because I just feel like I'm already reading so much for all of my work anyway. Like the last thing I want to do when I'm just trying to detox and take a break is read. For me, like reading is just, oh man, you've really put me on the spot here. There was a really good book that I read on Thomas Jefferson. So it'd probably be, I can't remember the name of it, but things like historical like people in history that I like, Jefferson, who I really admire. I mean, it would be something like that. But I can't remember the name of the book. It's been so long ago.
All good. If you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
Oh, no question, it would be Alzheimer's. I mean, that just, in my opinion, it's worse than cancer. I mean, at least with cancer, people think there's some grasp of, I mean, even though, and I'm not into poisons, I mean, I saw the medical system absolutely destroy my father with, he didn't even do chemo. He just surgery and radiation. And he went from being in health in July of 11 to dead in July of 12, June 12, just totally devastated that man in under 12 months. I would never do that to myself. But even with all he went through and a couple of other family members with cancer, I still, after all of my experience now with people with Alzheimer's, that would be it for me. That's number one. It's just horrible.
Yeah. If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
Well, I grew up as a child really loving Hulk. Maybe that was why I got into bodybuilding. So it would probably be like that level of, strength and the capacity just to not even be injured. I mean, it just, you basically can't kill that guy. So I'm guessing, he's mortal. I mean, he's eventually going to die, but at least in terms of when he's alive, he's got this ridiculous strength and the ability to basically do anything.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, I have a bunch. I don't know if I have a number one. I have so many, but definitely I'm a pretty neat freak. So I can't stand a mess. Having a mess around me drives me nuts.
I get that. All right, last one. In your opinion, what's the next frontier in wellness?
Well, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, and that is looking at, and maybe this is more specific to nutrition only as opposed to just the broader wellness field, but I think it's time for us to take the next step about how we view nutrients and phytonutrients and all the different elements that we utilize for health, in the sense of we're so focused on the biochemistry, but we forget the physics. And so for me, I think we need to take that next step in just not being so closed-minded about biochemistry and looking at how all this stuff impacts us on the physics level, because I think that's really where some of the answers are related to why these polysaccharides are so beneficial. It's beyond biochemistry. So whether it's a resonant frequency relationship between those materials and our cells, or something else about how our cells recognize them on that level, for me, I think that's going to be one of my, assuming I can fund it myself, because I'm not going to get anybody else to do it, but that's going to be my next step. And I think there's a lot of potential there to get people to understand that this is beyond biochemistry. There's something else much more special to these nutrients, and in certain cases like these polysaccharides.
Yeah, for sure. We should hook you up with the guys from Aloe who were here a couple months ago, and their whole thing is about the physics in water and the molecular structure of water, which is fascinating.
It really is. Well, we are frequency beings, right? I mean, we all resonate on a certain frequency. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, Dr. John Lewis, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody how to connect with you, where to learn more, all that good stuff.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure for you having me. I've been waiting on this experience for a while, so it's glad to finally happen. I'm glad it finally happened, but our brand is Dr. Lewis Nutrition. You can find us at that same website URL, Lewis, Lewis, nutrition.com. All of our social media handles are under Dr. Lewis Nutrition, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can contact us through email or telephone at the website. And Daily Brain Care is our flagship product. We are in the process of expanding our product line. We've got several other new products coming out in the near future. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has and, create any kind of opportunity for people to learn. I'm always happy to do that.
Love that. Well, thank you again. Thank you for helping all of us learn here today. Just truly appreciate all your expertise and insights.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. So friends, on Friday with our Nutrition Nugget, we're talking about stars and honey bars. So you may remember our Nutrition Nugget on Bear Bells bars. Following that episode, one of you reached out to me and said that the stars and honey bars were all over your social media after listening to that episode. So we're going to look at stars and honey bars. on Friday in this week's Nutrition Nugget. So be sure wherever you're listening, click the plus sign or the follow button, and then your app will alert you when the Nutrition Nugget goes live Friday morning at 3 a.m. Eastern. And of course, as always, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Website also has all of the merch available for you. And please pick your platform, send a message. I want to hear your takeaways, your ideas, your questions. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your health coach. Dr. John Lewis, just appreciate you. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Jenn. It's been my pleasure. I'm happy to come back anytime you like.
Love it. And friends, if you are not already, join our membership by going to glow.fm/saladwithasideofries to show your support for this podcast, this community, and most importantly, your health. You'll get this week's recipe for the cauliflower salad with dates and pistachios and 10% off my favorite Aloe product. So until next week, remember, chronic disease is a function of missing raw materials. And Aloe might be a missing tool from your health toolkit. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.